State of Play is here, and we are happy to see back with us Jan Ting, a Newsworks contributor and professor of law at the Beasley School of Law at Temple University. Also here is Stephanie Hansen, an attorney with Young, Conaway, Stargett, and Taylor. Thanks for being with us again. There was a horrific shooting this past weekend at a Wilmington park. I got plenty of attention and discussion throughout the week on talk radio about the role of the Mayor Baker, in responding to the incident, in I guess setting the police up properly to prevent an incident. What is the role of a mayor when a tragedy occurs? Any public official, really, but specifically to the city of Wilmington and the mayor. What should be the role for him?
Well, I think the mayor's role is to console the population, and I think Mayor Baker has been out there talking, sharing the reaction that people have to this terrible incident. I don't think there's really grounds for criticizing the mayor. The mayor is, other than the fact that it's campaign season, and the mayor is reaching the end of his third term, and we're in the midst of a campaign to decide who his successor is going to be. The mayor has made very clear throughout his career that he is a strong opponent of gun violence. He's part of that mayor's coalition that's calling for more restrictions on gun ownership and running up against a brick wall. And part of the political dilemma is that while everyone abhors gun violence, a significant segment of the population loves guns. And so in that political climate, it's very difficult to deal with the issue of gun violence.
And I think what you're also seeing is a winding down of his term. You know, I mean, Mayor Baker has been in office for a long time. Was it 3 terms? So it's been about 12 years. Right. And so we're coming down to the final few months of the term. And I think that it's probably good at this point that we get to test, we get to see test the mettle of the candidates that are out there. Who are the candidates now that are bringing forth ideas and that are out there and really pushing? Because those are the ones that we have to look at as a community and say, who do we believe in to take over at this point? So, you know, I think that it's probably not fair to say, well, Mayor Baker should have been out there, should have been a lot more visible. Why isn't he out there as visible as Kevin Kelly is right now? Well, the political reality is because Mayor Baker is coming to the end of a 12-year term, and Kevin Kelly and others want to take that position over. So we expect to see them more out front.
And it really does set the table for the campaign. Is crime, obviously it's on our minds this week, for some incidents even going back into June with a couple of shootings within a 24-hour period. Is that the main issue in the campaign, to replace Mayor Baker, because it spills over into so many other things with the perception of a dangerous Wilmington? The economy suffers because of that. Is crime number one?
Absolutely. Crime is by far the #1 issue in the city of Wilmington. I believe so.
Yeah, public safety is always at the top of the list, regardless of what year it is. And so it's always going to be an issue, and it's always a challenge, particularly in this tight fiscal environment, as to how government responds to it. I think looking over Mayor Baker's term in office, I think he's done a lot of good things. I mean, you have to have economic development if you hope to deal with public safety, and I think he's made a lot of progress in that regard. Again, it's hard as the mayor of a small city to try and deal with problems that are extend really beyond the city's boundaries.
That was going to be the next question. Can the next mayor really get a handle on? Can he or she do anything differently to stop, you know, some random shooting, or maybe not so random shooting, but somebody pulling a gun at a soccer game? What could any elected official really do to stop that? I know crime in Chicago is really skyrocketing. Rahm Emanuel's taking a lot of heat for that. Does it fall on them, or is it the people who are doing the shooting that get the blame?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think ever since this terrible incident at the soccer field, I think people in Wilmington have been asking themselves, gosh, what can be done? Right. Do you want more like stop and frisk going on? Do we need tighter laws against illegal gun possession? Do we need to set up more metal detectors in public places? I mean, all of those things spring to mind, but they're not really practical. You can't actually move forward on any of those. So I think the new mayor's hands are going to be very much tied, as the current mayor's hands have been, and the political reality, the fiscal reality mean that you have to do what you can do, and what you can do is try and make the economic environment better for the city of Wilmington and try and create more jobs for people, more opportunities, better schools. All of those, I think, are legitimate objectives.
And I think that Wilmington is right now in the midst of trying a new strategy for dealing with crime in the city. And I think that it's been fairly recent, within the last month or so, that they have started with that. It's maybe the North Carolina way, you know, where you actually try to target the worst offenders, but then also folks that are going to be more likely to be repeat offenders and get to them on a personal level. And I just don't think that something like that is going to, you're going to see a result overnight. So, you know, I think that there are some things on the table that they're trying right now, and it's just going to take a while to work through them.
Let's switch gears now. We could debate the whole health care ruling for probably a long time, but let's bring it a little bit more local to Delaware. A few weeks ago, we had Representatives Jakes and Kowalko on the show talking about 10 minutes about their plan for a single-payer health care for Delaware system, a bill that they introduced and is going to be, I guess, looked at a little bit next year. Then earlier in this show, we had Governor Markell kind of dismiss it in about 10 seconds. Does Delaware need its own health care plan, or can we get by with the national plan?
Well, I think that we need to take a look at the single-payer healthcare idea, and to get an idea and to find out whether that really might fit for us. One of the big questions that's out there is, how much is it going to cost? Is it really going to cost us more, or is it really going to cost us less than we're already paying? Because you hear arguments on both sides, and somebody's got to be right and somebody's got to be wrong, but I don't know that there's been anyone that's really put that information out there. For instance, you hear that, well, it's going to be funded by an increased payroll tax, so you're going to pay more out of your paycheck. But does that mean that your paycheck is you're going to have more in your paycheck because you're not paying for your health care like you normally would be paying for out of what your employer is going to be taking out of your check? So where does that balance out? I haven't heard that yet, and I think that's an important thing we need to know.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of single payer. I think that is the logical way to go, the most efficient, the least expensive way to provide health care for all Americans. But I also agree with Governor Markell that the way to do single payer is on a national level. And one reason is because the federal government already has the infrastructure in place. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, as I think we would have to do if we were creating single payer in the state of Delaware. I mean, the federal government has the Medicare system out there, and at least structurally, simply extending Medicare to all Americans is something conceptually doable. I think it would be a heavy lift to create a single-payer system just in the state of Delaware. I think there'd be a whole bunch of unanticipated issues that we'd have to deal with. So I support Governor Markell's observation that the way to single-payer is at the federal level. And, you know, Stephanie raises a good point about all the factual issues that are surrounding even Obamacare, this kind of halfway measure towards health insurance that's already in place. I mean, there's just so much misinformation. And, you know, the Supreme Court ruled in the Stolen Valor Act that we have a constitutional right to lie just in time for election season. And so, you know, my perception is there are a lot of lies floating out there about Obamacare. The one that was called to my attention is the allegation that there's a 3.8% new tax on real estate sales. Just for your viewers, that's a lie. It's not the case. Don't believe those things. But there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think, you know, one of the things you'd have to deal with trying to create single payer at the state level is all of these concerns that Stephanie was talking about what does it cost, what is it really going to cost, and I think it's too complicated for Delaware to deal with. I think the federal government is the place to deal with that issue.
And I think the biggest problem that I hear that people have with the single payer is, if we put aside the what's it going to cost question, because I don't think anybody's given us an honest answer about that yet, is is it really going to mean that we're going to have to wait a long time to get the doctor's appointments and the surgical appointments that we need? If you look at the Canadian system, which is what people talk about when they talk about single payer, the Canadians do, and they even admit that's a problem with their system. You have to wait a long time. But you know, this isn't like us going to Canada, buying a Canadian car that gets 20 miles to the gallon and bringing it back to the United States and having a car that gets 20 miles to the gallon. This would be something like us looking at getting the plan for the Canadian car, bringing it back here, saying we don't want 20 miles to the gallon, we want to build it so it gets 40, and then building it so it gets 40. You know what I mean?
Improving on their system.
Correct. It's not just importing their system in, because their system does have problems.
All right, trying to separate fact from fiction here on State of Play. Thank you, Jan Ting and Stephanie Hansen. Don't